Hi there, I'm Air, and I use he, him.
Hi, I'm Embers Tide. I use he, him.
Hi, I'm Haley, and I use she, her.
I'm Jerika, I use she, her, and this is Insight Check, where we delve into the dungeon of your bad decisions to retrieve the treasure of wisdom. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We are recording it before PAX Unplugged, but it might come out afterwards. So there you go.
It'll come out when you least expect it.
We hope right now that you do have a good time at PAX Unplugged, but in the future, we will hope you had a great time.
Indeed. Alrighty then. Moving on swiftly to our dungeon crawl. I hear
Dungeon crawl.
we have a musical styling.
Yeah, we're going to do it live. We're either going to do Beastie Boys or Adele. What say you?
Oh, that's a hard one.
How do we choose?
Mash up them?
Yeah, why not both?
Ooh.
Pourquoi no dos?
Pourquoi no
I
los
just
dos?
mangled a bunch of languages
sleep.
together.
Till heartbreak.
Okay.
Ignore that one.
I mean, this is take one. We can have
Take
several
one.
takes.
Right. This is just more grist for Jay's sound editing master's degree. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you want to battle, you're in denial. Coming from the Dragon Heister Axel style. So go ahead, put my rhymes on trial. Eldritch blast you to exile. Roll in a stealth check, what's the DC? Roll in a stealth check, what's the DC? Roll in the stealth check, what's the DC? It's time for dungeon crawl. Rolling high DC. Character sheet inside your hand. And you're playing D&D.
Very, very, very good filming.
A+ mashup. So, folks, you can just put words, you can put requests into the Embers machine, and wonderful music comes out.
and something will happen. And the irony now is, you know that I'm genetically associated with someone who is a technically proficient voice actor and singer.
Still like you better. It's fine.
So you know you're getting the weak genes, but I'm going to try hard. I'm going to try perhaps even harder.
Everyone loves an underdog.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this podcast isn't Gattaca. Like, we're not going to kick you out if you have the wrong.
Oh, sure.
I've seen that movie. I see many movies a day.
I do so many movies a day.
I understand your pop culture references.
You say that now, but the first dice manufacturer sponsorship we get, I'm out on my ears.
Okay, Dungeon Crawl. I have a relatively short one. I watched Honey Heist 3.
Oh, tell me
Tova's
about
Honeys.
this heist.
All the honey heists have several elements that seem to be reoccurring, whether they're the face of the criminal organization or the muscle or the driver or whatever. Hats, and a silly children's dexterity game of the sort of Hungry Hippos variety. So I've seen 2/3 of that. And I am delighted. I did not realize going into it that it's, in the beginning, it's a little bit of a Charlie's Angels parody, but I get it now. It makes sense. And, oh man, Marisha Ray is phenomenal.
I mentioned it once or twice before, but I missed the first campaign of Critical Role, which I believe is in Tal'Dorei, which I believe this is also. Is that right?
So one of the characters is Trinket.
Mm-hmm.
Who is a character that's on Critical Role. So it's in the same universe. It's in the same general vicinity as the first campaign.
Tova was Noelle Stevenson's character from that first campaign, and she's a blood hunter, which is one of Matt Mercer's custom classes that can turn into a werebear. So I figured that was kind of the angle they would be taking with this one. I don't know if that's how they went with it, Jerika, or...
So there's this spoilers. There is an organization that Marisha has raised from nothingness into existence called the High Bear Nation.
Oh god.
And it is like basically
I love it so
it's
much.
great. It's so good. And it basically is like bear rights and well-being society kind of thing.
Right to bear arms.
And, you know, it's a faction in the bear community. So Tova is an agent of the High Bear Nation. The previous Honey Heist had sort of encounters with the High Bear Nation, but it was more like loosey-goosey. So, like, Trinket is like his own bear.
He's his own bear.
So
He's
would
his own.
Trinket be advocating for the right to bear charms?
Yeah.
I'll let myself out. Sorry.
Okay, this is actually where we kick you off the episode.
No.
That was it. That was
Just
Team
kidding.
Rocket's blasting off again.
Well, I'm excited to watch that because I do know I love
great.
Mercer. I do know that Laura Bailey is incredible, and I'm a very big fan of Christina Ariel, the cosplayer, and I guess D&D
Siren. I think she's on
muse.
Sirens of the
She
Realms.
is Sirens of the Realms. You're right. So I'm very pumped to catch up with it.
Yeah, it's got all the good folks in it, and probably wacky hijinks, and also silly hats, and also children's games. So what else could you ever want?
Nothing. I'm done.
Someone else do a dungeon crawl, please.
All right, so I have a very short and somewhat selfish dungeon crawl, but the C Team Raps crew has finished 7 tracks for our next album. And
Yay!
I believe all of the music is original and it is all really good. And I'm very excited to reveal it and send it over to the cast. So I'm hoping to finish it before the end of the calendar year and then send it to the Acquisitions Incorporated crew. And because it has it has a more robust representation of the Modron lore, I'm also trying to, like a good little weevil, burrow my way into Wizards of the Coast and find the one person at WotC who's most obsessed with Modrons and get it to their hands.
On this most recent episode on D&D Beyond's Twitch channel of Todd Talks, he went on a short interlude about Modrons, which included his guests, Amy Vorpal, Jerry Holkins, and Christopher Perkins. And Christopher Perkins seemed to really take to the Modrons. So you might want to watch that to, get some data. Can I ask you a question that you may or may not want to answer at this moment in time?
Yeah.
So how many tracks total are you aiming for?
12.
Cool.
More than 50%
Yes.
done.
Yes, exactly. I am in project manager mode in full, and I have a couple of pieces that I need to come in. I have a couple of arrangements that need to get tightened up, and then we will be able to shoot up to over 10 tracks. And I'll be able to make the call of, do we have 1 or 2 tracks that we keep for a B-side, which is a good place to be in if you're trying to produce something nice and cohesive and strong.
Cool. How do people enter tracks for those projects?
So if we're already working with a few people in the team, we work in Discord and we share work in progress files using Google Drive or Dropbox. And sometimes if we have an MP3, they're usually small. So they're small enough to actually upload directly to Discord so people can use the Discord player to play them. That's pretty much how we've been doing it so far. The one
So
thing
if
that
someone's interested in
Yes.
getting into the Discord or becoming
rapper.
a member of the working group, how
Yes.
would they do that?
So that is what I was hoping you were asking.
All
And
the
that's a
crew. Jerika.
that's a bigger question challenge
them
that I have, because really anybody who wants to come in and wants to contribute something is more than welcome. The smallest contribution gets represented the same way as someone who writes the arrangements and does all the lyrics and all that stuff, just because we're not doing this for ourselves or for recognition. We're doing it to create something fun that the cast or the people we hope receive it should love. So the challenge I have is, I think it seems a little bit daunting, and I don't want to sound like a broken record going on Twitter and being like, anybody can do this, there's no skill required, we know because we have no skill, but we're doing it anyway. And we just like to invite more people in. So I think that sometimes there's the perception that you have some filter or gate that's being kept or anything like that. We don't have any of that. So anybody with an idea, anybody who puts a track out, if they'd like to include it in what we're doing, we'd be so happy. The only request that I make is as we get closer to finishing the product, the album, that people don't leak the tracks. That's the only request that we make. And if they want to put the tracks out on their own SoundCloud or however they want to do it, I totally fully support it, and I love that there's more work being done and put out there. But I'm now trying to create this finished product, and I want it to be a surprise, and I want the scope of it to be a surprise. So that's why we go into stealth mode.
Very cool.
Yes, I think some people may worry that they wouldn't be able to come up with a whole song. So this is your cue if you've been thinking that it might be fun, but you didn't know if you could write a whole song and sing it by yourself. Well, you should hit up and join the crew, as Air says I should call it.
Absolutely. I can promise you that you do not need to sing, and you do not need anything more than a couplet of lyrics that you like. And that's my dungeon crawl.
My dungeon crawl for this week is that I'm very excited to be leaving for PAX Unplugged and enjoying all that PAX has to offer this coming weekend. I am leaving in 2 days for Philadelphia.
Oh, man.
I'm leaving in
Friday?
Yeah, 4 days.
4 days. Yes. I'm very excited for it.
If I were to put you on the spot, what would be 1 to 3 things you are excited to experience or achieve or do at this PAX Unplugged?
At this PAX Unplugged. So I have a very maybe non-PAX related PAX goal, but my goal for this PAX is to try to keep things a little more low-key than I maybe have done at past PAXs, and just remember that I can take breaks and there will be more PAXs in the future that I can do more things at, because sometimes I start to worry about whether I'm doing enough things or missing things, and I'm just going to try to chill out. That being said, I'm also really excited to see lots of community members coming in from all over, even international. I know some of our international checkers and national checkers, people in this country, people from other countries, are coming to Unplugged. So I'm really looking forward to seeing people. And I'm also really excited about some of the panels and live shows. I tried to keep it to 3. How'd I do?
Nice. Very well.
Specifically for panels. I always love the Make a Strip panel and the Q&A with the Penny Arcade guys. But I'm also really excited for Jeremy Crawford's keynote on Friday. That'll be how I kick off my PAX. I'm excited for that. And of course, Live C Team and Acking.
Yeah. Maybe we should talk a little bit more about that too.
Yes, there's some news.
It's a shakeup.
Breaking news.
Some changes in the org chart. So we should probably say this is a spoiler-heavy segment of this show.
Spoiler-heavy segment. Hopefully by the time it comes out, most people will have watched this or know about the things in question.
Exactly. But if you haven't...
you have not,
you
may want to pause this and go watch the AI content that has recently come out before proceeding.
Yes. So in the past, when we're recording this, we have just seen this surprise episode of Acquisitions Incorporated that went straight to YouTube. It had been hinted and leaked by, I think, Alyssa from the Penny Arcade. She tweeted something about, hey, it's funny to see Chris Perkins and Pat Rothfuss and Amy T. Falcone and all these people doing voice recording work. That's odd. So this episode comes out. It won't go into full detail, but it's a continuation of the Acquisitions Incorporated story arc with Jim Darkmagic and Omidron. And at the end of it, there's one significant piece of news as Chris Perkins pauses mid-narrative and says, from this moment on, I am going to relinquish the DM's chair and for the foreseeable future, hand it over to Jeremy Crawford, my colleague at Wizards of the Coast. And it's been a hell of a run torturing you guys over the past 11 years. And I'm assuming at that point the camera cuts because everyone's crying and embracing. But it comes back and there's Jeremy Crawford.
Jeremy rules errata heat machine Crawford?
Yeah, the very same.
Oh.
Heat machine?
Listen.
It's like a Tom Jones thing?
Spy on
I don't
me,
feel...
baby,
Yeah, I don't... I don't think we need to quantify my feelings vis-a-vis Jeremy Crawford. Let's just say he's got a beautiful, pedantic mind, and I appreciate it.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Sorry, I was still singing Sex Bomb in my head.
I actually thought to myself maybe 2 or 3 months back, oh, hey, I wish I could see Jeremy Crawford DM one of these days. Mm-hmm. And I think he did. This might have been back when D&D in a castle was going on, because he DM'd that.
He did.
But there weren't any like streams or anything. And then I believe he DM'd a stream for Extra Life recently. And I was like, oh, I should go watch that. Oh, dang. And now he's all up in my Ac Inc. So I'm like, hey, guess I'm going to watch it.
I think it will be cool, but as someone who really only found D&D and got interested in D&D because of Chris Perkins and AI, it'll definitely be like a little bittersweet for me.
Yeah.
Or maybe like, I don't know. I think it'll be a really cool change, but there's definitely like the part of me that's a little like sad about it. I'm sure Jeremy is going to be awesome, and I'm really excited to see what he does.
But there's the other side of that emotional coin, for sure.
Yeah.
Like I remember 10 or so years ago, I was still in graduate school and working extremely weird late hours in like a microscopy and brain science lab. Like
brain lab.
Right. I was recording from these little cells in this giant rig of electromagnetic amplifiers and oscilloscopes and stuff. And I would just be there for hours. And I was a big fan of Penny Arcade, and I listened to their podcasts, and I was running out of material because I was basically living this ascetic monk lifestyle as a scientist. And I listened to a ton of stuff on my iPod. And this came on, and it was, Mike, Jerry, and Scott Kurtz. And I got so hooked. And it was about the time that I was just getting back into Magic the Gathering. And it was, I think, around the time that Ravnica was getting launched. And I was just sucked in to both at the same time. And, Chris Perkins was a player in that, but as he continued on for so long, he became really the fundamental voice of the worlds that were being created over all that time. I remember in the first season, about halfway through, Chris leaves and somebody else comes in to finish the rest of the campaign. And I got so mad. I got so angry.
I would say that those are probably the episodes of Ac Inc. that I've listened to the least times.
Yeah.
So this will just be an adjustment because I find like just not Chris's voice a little jarring in that setting. But I think that's also just a testament to Chris as this.
I think so too.
That he is, and the DM that he is.
I think so too. And he's been a part of this big universe that's been created. And the other part of the spoiler from the show is that the gang winds up in Ravnica, which makes sense because Acquisitions Incorporated was always one of the ways that Wizards of the Coast sort of debuted and demoed some of their new content. So that makes sense for this as well. And I think Jeremy is very tightly tied to Ravnica. But I am a Ravnica super fan, so I'm super excited about that. So
That's awesome.
I'm really
it's really cool because D&D Beyond has been releasing shorts on their YouTube channel about Ravnica and the guilds and all that kind of stuff. So it's really piqued my interest. And I also wanted to mention Amy T. Falcone plays not an insignificant part in this AI story. And it seems to me that she might now be the 4th A-team member, which I am super proud of her. I know that doesn't really mean anything, but I think she's really happy about it. Let's put it that way. And excited. So I'm happy for her. And it's really, really awesome that she gets to, as Walnut, take the stage with Omen, and also as Amy to take the stage with her friends Mike and Jerry, and also Pat.
So are you telling me that both Jeremy Crawford and Amy T. Falcone will be in the same D&D game at the same time?
Yeah.
Gotta get Aaron a cold shower stat.
I'm gonna need a minute.
When I was feeling all of these D&D emotions, I had to remind myself too that 11 years is a long time to do anything.
It's so true. It's so true.
And so, I think, this is also a good way to, bring maybe some more freshness and life to the AI games, which are such a big part of, PAX and I think the community as a whole. So, getting this new content, new worlds to learn about, I'm pretty excited about that aspect of it.
I think it's going to shake things up in an exciting way. It's going to bring new perspective, new storytelling style. It's going to add a lot more than it takes away.
I want to be a Loxodon.
Yes, you do. Oh,
I don't know anything about this new setting. I have had no exposure to anything other than Faerun. So
imagine it's a guild based structure in the card game. So you have in Magic the Gathering, one of the fundamental concepts, much like alignment in D&D, is the color wheel. So there are 5 colors and they all have their unique characteristics. They all represent different facets of existence. And then you have combinations of 2. So the colors are white, red, blue, black, and green.
It's the colors of the dragons in D&D.
There you go. And you can have I call them resonant pairings and dissonant pairings. So you have pairings that are naturally attuned to each other and opposed to each other. Each of those pairings became a guild, and each of those guilds represented itself with, a certain personality, but it was in this giant city, this giant kind of mecca this metropolis called Ravnica. And so they would war against each other. They represented law, chaos, experimentation, natural order, the wild reclaiming of the city by nature, the forces of nature. And all of these were kind of warring or partnered entities at different times. So you got deep into politics, you got deep into factions, you got deep into mechanics. And there was just so much going on. And I think it lends itself extraordinarily well to long form narrative stuff.
Cool. I'll have to do some research. I like the idea of some different technology as opposed to just your set epic fantasy type setting. It's kind of cool to see a different twist on things.
So Embers.
Yeah.
In Faerun.
Indeed.
I usually think of myself a lot of the times as chaotic good. What color pairing would go with chaotic good, do you think, or with my personality as you as you have seen it?
So how much are you attuned to? This is going to be 20 questions, but with far fewer than 20 questions. Are you attuned fundamentally to nature or to kind of the structures of humanity, cities, law, structure, that kind of stuff?
I think if we're talking about role-playing games, nature.
And it's chaotic good. I would say that you would be white-green. And who is the white-green guild?
Life and growth.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, they all have names that I can never remember.
Selesnya.
Very
Now,
cool.
if you had more of a lawful order bent and less of a natural attunement, I would say that you were Boros. Boros is white-red, so you have like the chaos of, the chaos and the impulsiveness of red, and the guidance towards a lawful order in white, but it's that mix of law and chaos that you'd have. But because
Is red green a pairing?
absolutely, hell
The
yeah,
holiday
it is.
color.
I feel like that's me.
Festive.
This is why I really loved Ravnica.
Red green
Ravnica's
is
so
apparently
blue-blacks.
gruel.
Yep, Gruul. That would be the Gruul.
Gruul, is it?
Yes.
Yes. So if you like the what's the Catwoman character from She-Ra? The new She-Ra.
Catra.
Catra. So she looks like she was carved out of one of the Gruul cards. That's what they all freaking look like. And it's great. I love it. I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Insight Check Podcast Ravnica edition.
So that's a natural segue, I feel, into Clerics.
Obviously.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I played a cleric as my first class when I started D&D 5e.
Me too.
I played a cleric as my first class with all of you.
I was spoiled.
Did as well. Yes, it's a good class.
Let's talk about why. And also the history.
Shall we?
Roll
call.
I had a difficult time when I was first picking cleric as my class because I had like a lot of preconceived notions about what clerics were and what I would have to play like. And over the last year and a half of our campaign, I have been proven very wrong. Happily so. I don't know if I made another character. If I made another character today, I would probably make a cleric.
Nice.
And I am not in my IR life. I am not really a religion person. And so the whole like religion aspect was just sort of like, it didn't draw me. It didn't appeal to me. I didn't really want to be like a preachy kind of holy character. But our party didn't have any healing. And at the time, I was like, I don't know anything person in our group. And I was like, okay, I will play the healer. And at the time, I was like, I guess I'll do this. I can just be like a support character. And that'll be fine because it's my first time playing D&D. I don't even know if I'm going to like it. So I will just make this character. And then I started reading more about clerics. And I was like, oh, cool. I can make like a different kind of cleric so that she could be more interesting than just like, I love God and God is my life.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's kind of what I thought clerics were. And like, which is funny because like I've watched Acquisitions Incorporated and that was literally my only insight into what a cleric could be. But for some reason I still thought that it would be like all holy stuff.
Bible campy.
But then I was like, oh, there's all these different like kinds of clerics. That's pretty cool. And so I settled on a nature cleric because what I really wanted to be was like a ranger. And then I was told that rangers were bad by the internet. And then I decided to be a cleric. But I'm totally happy that I did make that choice.
Why? Tell me some reasons why.
Well, it's been really interesting since I'm like not a religious person to like think about what would a character do who like has a direct connection to their god and can ask for things. And it's been interesting just given our storyline and sort of what my character has had to go through of like sort of starting to follow a different god and like becoming a chosen person that has to save the world and like meeting all of these minor gods. It's been just like a very interesting almost thought experiment for me. And even though my divine intervention has not yet ever worked, it's interesting to have that thought process of like not just being like, I will fix it myself, of being like, nope, my character will ask the higher powers to fix things for them. So that's been really interesting. And I also think just in terms of learning how to play D&D, like it's been really good, because while in the very beginning it was a little overwhelming, I think the mix of like melee and spell casting is really cool. And there's also the freedom of being able to change your spells every day, so you're not making long-term decisions like some other classes. It gives you a little more freedom to like trial and error a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
I also realized last week that I've been playing a lot of things wrong for a while, which made my character a lot more exciting.
I would like to argue that you weren't playing things wrong. You were playing them incredibly stringently right. Like, you created a set of rules on top of the original rules. And I was like, wow, oh,
you just think that this is a lot harder than it actually is.
Yeah, I was like, oh, you could do so many things.
And I was like, wow, my character's the coolest character ever.
Yeah.
It only took me a year and a half to figure out. So for those of you who are looking at your player's handbook, and maybe no one in the world has ever read the player's handbook like this, there's a section under every cleric domain that says channel divinity, and then it describes your channel divinity, and then underneath that there are things you get at other levels. Those aren't channel divinities and don't count towards the number of channel divinities that you can do in a day. So I did my first divine strike in a year and a half, and I've been a level 8 or higher for quite some time now.
And it was a natural 20.
It was really good.
Blah, 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 blah.
But yeah, for some reason I thought that was like a nested section of things. And I was like, how do I have all these options when I only get 2 channel divinities a day?
So I did Adventurers League when I started D&D. And I made a cleric of the light. He was a half-elf. He was also a jerkbag.
Oh, no.
I've talked about him before. And so that's how I kind of differentiated him from the image I have of like goody two-shoes. Sort of like, I heal you, so I have to be nice and good and kind all the time. And he was not that.
He was not.
Yeah.
Era, tell us about your cleric.
Yeah, my friends and I started with 5e. I am a 5e babby. And when we started, our friend was, I've told this story before, but our friend was going to DM because he had before. And then he was like, this is a lot to learn. And I was like, well, I've already learned it because I am me. So I'll DM. And because I had gotten really super into it. And but I had already made a PC. So we were starting from the basic rules. So they give you 4 characters to work from. They give you a champion fighter, a thief rogue, a evocation wizard, and a life domain cleric. And I always normally play I don't know why, but I always play the holy melee caster. I think I probably would have gone paladin for my initial foray out, but it wasn't an option. So I went cleric, and also no one else wanted it. And he was a pretty stock kind of like Don Quixote kind of character. He was a bit of a madman, and kept going on about how we'll leap into the darkest depths of this dungeon and expel the fecal matter of evil. And yeah, a little bit. After I started listening to Taco, I was like, oh god, I think that was the voice I did. I guess that's the generic ridiculous voice. Yeah, anyway, so that was him. I can't even remember his name, but inevitably in DMing he kind of became like the character I would use as the crux of the narrative, and for Deus Ex Machinas and slap hand. I've learned a lot since then. But
we all start somewhere.
Cleric is a great first foray for someone who really wants to do a deep dive on a character, because they have a bit of everything, and depending on the domain you pick, you can really get into a wealth of things, more martially oriented or magically oriented or skill oriented. They really do cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, the domains are one of the things that I find most compelling about the cleric. I think that they each provide a lot of really provocative, I guess, creative inspiration for the player to define who their character is and how their character got to where they were in an adventuring party. And they differ a lot, and I just find them all really compelling. Like the work that Wizards did to define those domains, I think was very strong.
I love that they gave spells from different classes too, so that like you get the flavor not just in how you RP, but in what you can actually do. Like I think some of my favorite Fia moments, Fia being my cleric, for those of you who don't know, as I talk about her all the time, is when she's like talked to animals and asked them for help, or like use like Wind Wall is one of my favorite spells to use for things. And those I wouldn't have if it wasn't for Nature Domain.
I really want to say that I know, again, Jeremy Crawford, who we've my affection for has already been established in this podcast, talked about how the cleric domains are what he thinks is one of the triumphs of design in 5e, and I really love that they've managed to take. It's probably the most systematically designed and standardized design class. Like every domain gets a second use for their channel divinity right off the hop. Every domain either gets potent spell casting to up their cantrip damage, or divine strike to up their melee damage, depending on what they are. They either get heavy armor proficiency or weapon proficiency, or don't. But every single one of them at every single level that those domains get their features has a consistency to the design that I'm just really impressed by, that they managed to get so much flavor and so many different permutations out of this very set design philosophy for this class.
And it makes like the playing possibilities endless. Like I could play clerics forever and have them all be very different.
This is what I feel about druids, Haley. You understand now.
Yes, it's so good. And also, like, once you've learned to play, like, now that I've learned that all of these things aren't channel divinities, when I go and play, like, the Order Cleric of my dreams, or Death Domain Cleric, which are two that are high on my list.
Abhorseman.
Abhorseman, as Air likes to say. I should explain this joke. But now I'm laughing too hard. Because all I can picture is that stupid horse centaur with abs.
Garth Nix, Google it.
That you shared the first time. But when the Death Domain, I think it was when the Unearthed Arcana came out, Jerika and I were very excited about the Abhorsen flavored characters. For those of you who have not read this series by Garth Nix, you're missing out. Go educate yourselves. And Air likes to call them Abhorsemen. That's the joke. I've now made it.
Now you get it too. Yeah.
Now you know the rest of the story.
The entire story. But now that I know how to play a cleric, like it's just a matter of different role play and not necessarily of like learning everything again.
The wizards and clerics, in terms of the full casters, they really they knock them out of the park. There's so many options. They're super flavorful, and the mechanics they created for them are super rich and super interesting. That you're right. You could play a cleric for your entire D&D career and never play the same one twice.
And
exactly.
Also, like, they came up with all of these options for spells too that are really more RP based than just damage based, or like utility things that I think could be really cool. Like there's things that I have no idea when you would use. Like if you cast Hallow over and over again for 30 days, then you make a permanently holy space. Like some of these things are really cool. I'm not sure when you would use all of them, but it just gives this like depth to the cleric character of like, oh, I can prepare ceremony, and I could get ready, and I could have a coming of age. So it gives me like some idea of like when we stop adventuring, what will Fia go and do with her life? Like she'll probably do a lot of casting of plant growth to improve people's farms, and ceremonies to wed people and things like that.
So I think this might actually be a natural segue, the first time for that to happen, into our first question here, by you talking about the breadth of cleric abilities and what they can do. We have a question which is from Seven-Sided Die, on the RPG section of Stack Exchange, which is given how powerful low-level clerics are. How can I justify a more harsh or uncaring, more true-to-life medieval setting when clerics can, cure wounds or detect poison or disease or create water? Like, there's not going to be drought, there's not going to be famine. They can create food, they can heal poisoning and illness multiple times a day. So the question, they said, is, in a nutshell, given that even a low-level priest is probably not uncommon in most villages, let alone big cities, how can the presence of crippled, diseased, or unhealthy people be justified in the world? Are the streets in D&D remarkably absent of people with limps, broken bones, bad backs, the hungry, the blind, and the sick? So what do we think? Do clerics make the world such a good place that there is no, the maladies of the real world about?
I mean, everything comes at a price, and some people can pay it and some people can't. So I think the middle swath of people can probably get some of that more than normal. But I think there's still bad stuff.
I like the idea of a cleric-run soup kitchen, just bowl soup, just twiddling their fingers.
I think it depends on the cleric, too, and, what are their goals?
Yeah, and just because you're a cleric doesn't mean that you're into empathy and compassion.
There's certainly some domains that are, definitely not about that. A lot of, pull yourself up by the bootstraps is what my God preaches sort of thing.
Yeah, right. I think that if you looked at limiting the domain representation, that would be an interesting way to try to do it. You could have a community or an area where a very zealous devotion to a specific domain made certain kinds of proficiencies at lower levels more rare, or even going within the domain and trying to carve out some of those common things that you think might overpower a low-level cleric in this setting based on what you want to create in the setting. You could do that as well under the auspices of this is either a draconian government or religious caste that limits what clerics would otherwise do. But I think going by limiting domains and keeping domains as is might be an interesting first path.
Yeah.
I think that maybe that could be the way that you distinguish too between some of these different churches, or maybe your cleric's goal is to cure all suffering that they encounter, and that's what they do, whereas other clerics might be
and maybe it's super overwhelming.
Right, oh my gosh, I'm out of spell slots for today, but look at all of these injured people.
Cleric burnout is real.
Greater restoration every day, and then sleep a lot.
Next.
Right.
Next.
I do want to say that a lot of, if you read the flavor text for most of the classes in 5e, a lot of them try to speak to the rarity of those classes in the world. So, for example, for the cleric, this section reads, not every acolyte or officiant at a temple or shrine is a cleric. Some priests are called to a simple life of temple service, carrying out their God's will through prayer and sacrifice, not by magic or strength of arms. In some cities, priesthoods amount to a political office viewed as a stepping stone to higher positions of authority and involving no communion with the gods at all. True clerics are rare in most hierarchies.
Ooh.
And if you read the bard section, it says the same thing, no mere jongleur playing in a tavern or coin is a bard. Not every, city guard is a fighter. These are people that have excelled in their particular profession or whatever you want to call it.
They've
to
put
the
in
point.
their 10,000 hours.
Yes, yes. Malcolm Gladwell has bestowed upon them the power of the gods. But that's exactly it. They are pinnacles. Even a first level cleric is a pinnacle of, of being, righteous in their faith to the point that the gods have bestowed a portion of their power upon said person. So, like, that's the thing. When you become one of these people, they're not just running around willy-nilly. That preacher in a small town is probably just that. They might know how to do a medicine check, but whether they're willing and able to, summon up holy light to cure wounds is probably less likely.
I have breaking news that I'm going to interrupt this podcast with.
Oh, shit.
Okay.
Anna Prosser is in the A-Team game.
Yes,
Yay!
yes. And it will have been great since we saw it already.
Maybe we can edit this out, but I was so excited about it.
It's great. It's exciting.
There's the cutest little Chris Straub Evelyn. She's so happy. Okay, sorry. Back to Claire.
She's a paladin. She's super holy.
Like clerics are.
Like clerics are. And maybe that was my
Omen's a cleric.
Omen is a cleric. Maybe my misperception of clerics would more have been be my idea of what a paladin more so is now, much more righteous, as opposed to how I see clerics now.
We are creeping closer to that hour mark. Are there some
Should we
good cues that we should not fail to answer?
So this question coming from r/D&D, asked by Deacon Steele. That is a cool name. 5e cleric question. If I have a cleric of God A, doesn't really matter which god, can they act like they are a cleric of God B without any sort of intervention or loss of powers? Intervention from God A seems unlikely as long as their long-term goals for A were being met. But would God B intervene if this person's being something of a charlatan on their behalf? What do we think, people?
This is what I think. I think that there are gods of deception. There are gods of trickery. There are gods who would absolutely be behind this.
Yeah.
And then there are gods that would not be. That, truth, justice, the Faerunian way, they wouldn't be up for it at all. So you could actually get this really interesting tension and even possibly start a war between gods if you had a cleric of a trickster god who's impersonating a cleric of a very justice and truth oriented god, and there could be some battles. But if you did it the other way, where a cleric of a very lawful, truthful god is impersonating a cleric of a trickster god, that trickster god might try to lure that cleric in, make the dream a reality, because they can see that this person is actually their kind of people, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally.
I really like the idea of a trickery domain god like the Traveler or Loki or Garglet or Gold being oh shit, you're pretending to not worship me? That's here's another level. That's super meta.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Have some more of that.
Yeah,
have an obfuscation thing as well. Here you go.
Yeah.
The plans of mortals are hard to mask from the eyes of gods. So I think that it really depends on how well it attunes to the goals that a character in their god is set. And it may be a goal in and of itself, and it may be a price that a noble god must pay to achieve a grander goal. Sure.
Right, and maybe there's two gods that work well together, but another god is more accepted in a city than perhaps another, or those gods have the same aims, and there's some sort of godly agreement to share this cleric for a time so that the cleric can go about.
It reminds me of child care if you're co-parenting.
No, that's co-parenting. Joint custody of this cleric is the arrangement. That's how I think of Fia and her gods.
Cool.
She
sometimes Ralphil gets you every third Thursday
of the month, and then otherwise she's all about the Earth Mother.
You bring her back on the weekends, and it's all new spells and new armor,
new weapons. Yes, but in my mind, that works because her god, her original god, Rilthin Ralphil, whose name is also just a mouthful, is like would have similar goals to the Earth Mother. And the Earth Mother is more regional, and so I don't really see it being like her changing her faith necessarily. I think it's more of like she's just connecting to this local aspect of the entire Earth. And so there might be other situations, like maybe I don't know if two trickster gods would work together. But two like healing related gods whose names I cannot think of right now might work together on something.
What an interesting question.
Intriguing. Let's do the thing. Who's gonna do the thing?
I can't do the thing.
Too long, farewell.
I'll be to say goodnight.
This is all good A+ content. Thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of Inside Check Podcast. Thank you for joining and talking with us and asking questions in our Discord. We've been playing around there for a few weeks now, doing some fun things like leaking special project updates and some content there, and sharing lots of F-list drama. So if you like more time with us and the Insight Check team, find us at the link in the podcast notes. And if you enjoyed listening, please stop by, leave a comment, give a rating on our podcast. It, helps us in the busy run-a-day world of D&D podcastery. We'd also like to thank Vince Febt for our awesome theme music called Never Stand Alone, and the stellar Amy T. Falcone, who's rising on up for our social branding and adorable faces, because without her, we wouldn't have faces. So thank you. Answering your cues from our collective A's,
This
was
Insight.
Check!
We're checking the inside.
We're gonna need a minute. It's gonna be
just
exciting.
edit me out of the podcast.
Just edit you out now. Just ignore the heavy breathing.
God, can we pull this back from the edge of creepiness?
I'll take
please?
it back. I'll take it back.